Good evening, everybody. How are you doing? I hope everyone's doing well. It is a wonderful Wednesday evening, and I am here to do a message. I didn't go to church today. I didn't go to Bible study today so that I could, deliver this message. So just so you know, these messages are, I have what I think is probably like 6 of them now, which I thought it would have been 3, but I pre-recorded one already and it was like 45 minutes and I wasn't even done. So that means that when you're teaching, sometimes you need time to teach, and it's just difficult when you gotta shut it off at 15 or 30 minutes when you're trying to teach. This is not a preaching message, this is me trying to teach. So I'm going to try to get through 30 minutes right now, and then I'll do another 30 minutes each week until I can finish this out. But ultimately, what this is about, this topic is about for these next few weeks, is about the promised land. And for me, I am currently in it, right? I recently crossed Jericho. I'm in the promised land. I am here. I am in the process of possessing land. Like, that's where I'm at. I don't know how long this process is. I don't know how long this area of this time in the journey is. I really don't know. I recently came out of my wilderness period. The wilderness for me, whereas I thought it was like 2 years, honestly it was like 3.5 years. So 3.5 years of just me going through the notions of getting through the wilderness, getting prepared for the promised land and all that kind of stuff, and leaving Egypt and everything. So that's kind of what I went through. But right now what the Lord is telling me is so this isn't really like, this is for me, this is for you, but this is for me too. And it's especially for me because what the Lord is doing is he's saying, okay, so like those people who are currently in the promised land need a reminder of some things, right? And because sometimes we can forget, we do, the Lord knows that, so he reminds us. And you see a lot of that in Deuteronomy and things like that. Even in the first in the books from Exodus going through, the Lord reminded them a lot about what to do, how to do it in the promised land, getting to the promised land, all this great stuff. So what he's saying is if you're in the promised land, this is a reminder. If you're not in the promised land and you're crossing the Jordan, getting ready to knock down the wall of Jericho, listen, this is what you need to know. If you are in the wilderness, this is definitely what you need to know. And if you are in Egypt, you need to know this. So what does that mean? What is Egypt? Egypt is the place where you're in sin. You're living like the world. It is the place of where you're in sin, you're in bondage, you're in slavery to sin. That's pretty much what Egypt is. That's what it was for me. That's what it was for Israel. It was, they're in slavery. Our slavery is sin. Our slavery is bondage and yoked to rebellion and deliberate sin and things of that nature. And so when you leave Egypt, you kind of leave that life behind. Not kind of, you do. You leave that life behind. And when you leave that life behind, you need to be almost like reprogrammed. You need to understand the new terms and conditions before you go to the place where it is for the place where God ultimately wants you to go and wants you to thrive, multiply, increase, and things of that nature. When I was in the wilderness, the Lord had to take some things, purge some things, some ideas, some misunderstandings, some things that was in my heart. He had to do a lot of work on me. And when he did it, it was something that I had to do on my own. I couldn't take anybody with me. I couldn't be with anybody in the process. It was just a time for me and God, for him to get me right and prepare me for what he has for me in the promised land, and here I am. Okay. Now, so that's kind of the wilderness is, the Lord doing all the purging and preparing you and shaping you and forming you and taking everything that you thought you knew out of your mind and out of your heart, old ways of thinking and being and things like that. ways that you might have thought about yourself they thought, the people of Israel thought of themselves as slaves. Even outside of Egypt, they still had this slave mentality. They still had carried on some habits and things that they had gotten from Egypt, right? And so the Lord was trying to get all of that stuff out of them. So that's what the wilderness is. And then we get into the promised land. The promised land is a totally different thing. And so right now, my responsibility is to talk about, first of all, to remind you of the things that you need to remember and understand and know once you get into the promised land. So you need to know these things right now. And again, if you're in the promised land, you need to be reminded of these things. And I don't know if you are forgetting, and we do, like I said, we do forget. But when you get to the promised land, it's a totally different thing. And so I have to teach about it. I have to get a full understanding of it. And then I have to understand exactly how to navigate in this season. And obviously I don't do it on my own, right? I do it with the Lord. But again, I have a responsibility to play in it. All right, I'm going to start at Deuteronomy 11, and I'm going to try to make this, I'm going to try to be very precise right now because I don't want to go over 30 minutes. So wherever I leave off, we just have to start with it next time. But so chapter 11, Deuteronomy 11, verse 8, it says, "Observe therefore all the commands I am giving you today, so that you may have the strength to go in and take over the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess, and so that you may live long in the land, and that the Lord's so that you may live long in the land that the Lord swore to your forefathers to give to them and their descendants, a land flowing with milk and honey." What I want to do is really pretty much go through that first. I'm going to keep reading, but we're going to really focus on verse 8 and 9 today. Verse 10 says, "The land you are entering to take over is not like the land of Egypt, from which you have come, where you planted your seed and irrigated it by foot as in a vegetable garden. But the land you are crossing the Jordan to take possession of is a land of mountains and valleys that drinks rain from heaven. It is a land the Lord your God cares for. The eyes of the Lord your God are continually on it from the beginning of the year to its end." Now, right there, the Lord, right now, what I'm understanding is the promised land is not like Egypt. It has nothing, it's nothing like Egypt. Egypt is one thing, promised land is a whole other thing. And me, I am not in Egypt anymore, nor am I in the wilderness, but in the promised land. "Observe therefore all the commands I'm giving you today." So what are the commands? Well, first of all, in Leviticus, you have the book of the law, and that's where the people, the Israel was given certain laws and decrees, and quite a bit of them too, but a lot of laws, a lot of things that they were required to do, ways they were required to sacrifice, peace offerings and things like that, sin offerings. They were given laws for how to govern the land when they got over there. They were given laws for how to handle disputes between them, how to handle accidental murders, just everything, how to handle marriages, like all kinds of things, just how to handle different things. But it was all in the law. It was all a law. And they were required to maintain the law, and with that came blessing, and with rebellion and disobedience and sin came cursing. And in Deuteronomy, you in verse 20, chapter 28, you read a lot about the blessings and the curses. So in chapter 5, also Moses had given them the 10 Commandments, and those 10 Commandments, I've heard that the 10 Commandments don't apply, but then I've also heard some confusion as to how do the 10 Commandments apply when we have grace, when we don't do things by works and things of that nature. And when I look in the New Testament, I see how Jesus talked about things that are in the commandments, right? And it means we're still to follow them, but we'll talk about that later. But right now, just observe therefore all the commands I'm giving you. So he's saying, observe the laws, observe the commands, the 10 Commandments, observe all the decrees that I'm giving you today, so that you may have strength. Strength to do what? Well, first of all, he's saying so that you have the courage, the ability to and be strong enough to go into this land, to do what? To first go into it, to take it over, and then once you take it over, so that you may live long in the land, and also your descendants, so that everyone will live long in the land. And when he's saying live long in the land, he's not talking about just the individual people. He's saying generations after that. We see that in Deuteronomy 6. In Deuteronomy 6 verses 1 and 2, it says, "These are the commands, decrees, and laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you, to observe in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess, so that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live, by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you." So ultimately he's saying, these are the commands, but you are to observe them, and your children, you are to observe them. And when he's saying observe, he means keep or guard or watch over. You're supposed to observe these things, keep them, make sure you're following them in the land that I'm taking you into to possess. So the 10 commandments, or the commandments in the New Testament, and again, like I say, we'll talk about it, but we need to make sure we understand what is required of us when we get into the promised land. Ultimately, that is what I'm trying to say, is that you need to understand the covenant that you have with God and what part you play, and you need to understand what your responsibility is once you get to that promised land. And we're going to talk a lot about that over the next couple of weeks. But what is your responsibility in terms of when you get into the promised land? What is your responsibility, right? Well, first of all, your responsibility is to observe the commands and laws and decrees that the Lord gives you, right? You are to follow him, to listen to him, to obey his commands. And then it says you want to be strong enough to go into the land. Then you want to be strong enough to not only go into it, but to also possess it. And then you want to be strong enough to whereas you can live long in it, and not only you, but your descendants, your children, your children's children, generations after you. So what the Lord is doing is the promised land is meant for me and my children's children, for all of us to enjoy and partake in the good of the land, in the promised land. When I read that, I think, okay, well then that means that there's a possibility that if you don't uphold your end of the covenant, that you can your generations after you can be out of the covenant. They can be living like gone back to Egypt, if you will. They could be living in that way and not experiencing anything that the promised land has to offer. Why? Because the Lord's law decrees, his commands have not been observed. His requirements have not been observed. They have not been kept by us, and somewhere someone dropped the ball, right, or something like that. And then it says so that you may live long, in the land. And we talked about in Deuteronomy 6, 1-2. But to give you kind of an example of what he's saying, so in the book of Joshua, what I like about the book of Joshua is that, first of all, it's just a good book. It's such a good book. It pumps me up. Like, I get charged when I read it. Like, man, I can do I can take this land, right? Because Joshua was, to me, I felt like Joshua, like, man, that's a man, like he went and he did what the Lord said. He stayed close to God. He was strong. He was bold. He was courageous. And he went over there. He led the people. Him and Caleb, they trailblazed it. They got over there, and they really got a really good head start into taking and possessing the land. Whereas generations after them could have continued with that momentum and taken more land. Again, they didn't even take all of the land, right? And then, and so they could have kept the momentum going. But the issue is that someone dropped the ball. If we look in Judges chapter 2, it talks about how when Joshua and the elders that were there after he died, after all of them had died, it says it says, after that whole generation had been gathered to their fathers, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. That is the exact thing that the Lord had reminded them not to do. Don't forget those things. And where is that located? Well, if we look in Deuteronomy 8, if we look in 8, in verse 10, it says, when you have eaten and are satisfied, praise the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. Be careful that you do not forget the Lord your God, failing to observe his commands, his laws, and his decrees that I am giving you this day. Otherwise, when you eat and are satisfied, when you build fine houses and settle down, and when your herds and flocks grow large, and your silver and gold increase, and all you have multiplied, then your heart will become proud, and you will forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt. And so he goes through it. So that's what he didn't want. He didn't want them to forget about him. He didn't want them to get comfortable, receive all these blessings from the promised land, and then forget who got them there in the first place. And so the Lord, I feel like he's reminding me, and he's reminding you as well, that when you get to the promised land, don't get to because again, the promised land is designed for you to increase, for you to multiply, for you to thrive. That is physically, materially, but that is also spiritually. So I want to make sure that we're clear. You could be thriving financially and materially, but spiritually, you are weak. Well, that is not the promised land. The promised land is a matter of being spiritually mature and strong and covered and protected and following the Lord and listening to him and obeying him. That's the one thing. Being so developed in the spirit that you have the fruit of the spirit in you. That's the one spiritual blessing. That's the one blessing and that comes with the promised land, but also the material blessing. So if you have one without the other, then something may be off, because the promised land is designed for us to prosper and to multiply. Again, that is spiritually first though, and then physically. So you're missing something if you're prospering, not physically, materially and financially, but spiritually you are weak, or you are dead, or you're not connected to your life source. Then there's an imbalance there. So the prosperity and the multiplication and the increase of the promised land has to first start in you, in your heart, in your soul, that kind of thing. And then as you prosper in there, you prosper in every other area of your life, and then it spills over. So that's prosperity. That is the promised land the right way. The wrong way is you have the finances, the material blessings, but spiritually you're not there. Or spiritually you're there, you're rich, but for some reason you're just not getting it on the outside, the material blessings that come with it. And I'm not being materialistic or anything like that. It's just it's here. That's all. It's all here. So just saying that to say that's a checkpoint for you to kind of check it, to see where you are. A measuring, if you will, something to measure against, right? And then I think that was the only issue though that I had with Joshua, is that not Joshua, but with that generation that were there after he died, somebody dropped the ball. Someone did not pass that on to the children and the descendants that were after them. If they had that was what they were required to do. And again, we see that in Deuteronomy 6 verses 1 and 2, where it talks about your children and their descendants, right? So everybody is supposed to be affected by not only the prosperity of the promised land, but also the observing of the decrees and the commands, or walking in obedience to the Lord and living a life that is for God and not against God, a life of holiness versus rebellion and versus sin and things like that. So I guess that's the only issue that I really had, is that someone dropped the ball. But for us, we have to make sure that, so I'm saying this to say, let's make sure that that's what we're doing, that we are passing the baton over to our children and their children and their children, right? Not only teaching our children, but taking our children and explaining to them the importance of teaching it to their children. Well, so you see all of the things that the Lord has done for me. I'm telling you everything that he did for me, and you are seeing firsthand what he's doing for us. So you're watching the victories, the glory of the Lord being manifested in my life and in our home and around us and things of that nature. You're seeing the favor on your life. You're seeing how there's just favor in your life, in every area of your life, right? And so make sure that you recognize and give reverence and respect to the one who is keeping you like that. And then you make sure your children are learning that, hey, make sure you're also teaching your children. Make sure you are observing these things and seeing the goodness of the Lord, and you're giving credit where credit is due, so that your children can be blessed by the promised land and by God and all these other things, right? So it's something we have to pass down. It doesn't just stop with us. Otherwise, again, then you're not living long in the land. Then somebody's going back to Egypt, and it's possible, right? So what were the commands? So again, we talked about the commands being in Leviticus, the book of Leviticus, but then also the commandments that Moses gave to the people, the 10 Commandments. So what does the 10 Commandments have to do with the New Testament? The reason why I want to not cross-reference, but I want to connect the two, is because, again, I don't want there to be any confusion, right? I want us to be sure that there's some things we're supposed to do, but how are we supposed to do it? How are we supposed to observe the commands and things of that nature? So I'm going to go to Matthew 19:17 through 19. Matthew, let me see, 19, okay, so it says, this is Jesus speaking to this rich man. And the rich man's asking him, what good thing must he do to have eternal life? And so Jesus says, why do you ask me about what is good? He said, there is only one who is good. If you want to enter life, obey the commandments. This is Jesus talking. I'm just saying, this is the New Testament. And then the guy says, well, which ones? And then Jesus says, do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not give false testimony, honor your father and your mother, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And then if we go to Matthew 22, verses 37 through 40, Jesus replied, love the Lord. One of the Pharisees, I believe, asked him, what was the greatest commandment? And so Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Now, when I see that, I say, okay, well, now Jesus is covering all of the 10 commandments here. He's covering all of them. When he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul and your mind. Well, if you love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind, then if we go to the 10 Commandments in Deuteronomy chapter 5, it says, the first one is, you shall not have no other gods before me. Well, if you love the Lord with all your heart, soul, and mind, then why would you want to put any other gods before the Lord? You wouldn't want to, because it's the love that you have for him, the respect that you have for him. Just like anyone, you have that love and respect for a person. You don't want to put anyone before them or anything like that, right? And so you definitely don't want to do that to God. And it's not that he's saying that as if he's being self-centered or just wants the world to revolve around him, although it does. That's not the case. What he's doing is he's trying to save your life, because the thing about it is if you put other gods before him, those gods cannot do for you what he can do. Why? Because they didn't create you. They do not know you. They mean nothing to you. He is the one who created you. He's the one who knows how you're designed, how you operate. He's the one who knows what you need to thrive spiritually and physically and naturally. He's the one who knows you from the inside out. He's the one who's known you before you were in your mother's womb. It is only him. It is not no other God. So I hear that there are all these gods out there. I don't know. It might have said over 100,000 different gods, little g, right? Well, what is there? Oh, so there's the gods of the sea. There's the gods of the air. There's the gods of the birds, the gods of the dolphins, the gods of the fish, the gods of the catfish, the gods of the cotton, like little stuff like that. But it's silly, right? Because God created all of those things. He created the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air. He created the heavens and the earth, the lights in the sky, the ground on the earth, the vegetation, all of those things. He created all of those things. So again, you don't put any other gods before him at all, because if anything, that's going to lead you astray. And again, if you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, then the second commandment says, you shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven above, or on earth beneath, or in the waters below. So he's saying, listen, if you love me with all your heart, soul, and mind, you're not going to go make images. I don't care if it is in the form of something in heaven. I can't go and worship and hang on to and consider something holy like a necklace or a chain or a cross on it or anything like that. He created that thing. If anything, he is the one that I worship. But I can't take anything that's in the form of something that is godly and heavenly and make an idol out of it. Even if it is in the form of something heavenly, it's a form of it, but it is not actually anything of Christ and of God. It is something that is man-made. And so he's saying, don't put any gods or any idols before me. Don't make any in the form of anything, not only in heaven, but on earth and on and below, in the waters below. Don't make anything like that. If you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, then you will not misuse his name. You will not misuse his name. You will not lie on his name. You will not misuse it. You will not try to manipulate people with his name. You will not try to control people with his name. You will not bear false witness with his name. You won't do those things with his name. And that's what he's saying. So again, if you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, then automatically these 10 commandments they're going to just flow. If you love the Lord with all your heart, soul, and mind, it means that you're putting him first and at the forefront of everything that you do. So what does that mean? Then that means that he's at the center. That means that he's the one that you consult with things in your life. He's the one that you listen for. He's the one that you stay close to, because he's the one that can build you up and increase you and love you and provide you with everything that you need. It is not anything else that you can create that can take the place of Christ. He's in you. You have a direct line of communication with him. He's in you. He's around you. He wants to have a relationship with you, to talk to you, to help you, to guide you. He's there. He's there. If you are not able to see that or discern that or pick up the fact that God is always around you, if you're not able to hear him, then the question is what is stopping the flow? What is stopping you from hearing your Father's voice, from seeing your Father's hand on your life? What is stopping you from being attached to him in love? What is stopping you from being compassionate? What is stopping you from walking in love? What is stopping you from walking in faith in God instead of your own self and your own works? What is stopping you from walking in joy? What is stopping you from being kind to people? What is in the way? Something is in the way. The question is, what is it? So once you can identify that, you can allow God to help you to not only identify that, but to remove that thing from your life so that you can be good in every area of your life. All right? Now, if you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, then you will want to do what he wants you to do. You will want to follow him in every area of his life. Now, the one thing that I can't really give a lot of information on, and I think this is an area where I need to try to understand what it means for us today. I understand what observing the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. I understand that from the perspective of back then. But what does that mean for us today? This is a different time. This is a different day. Things are different here. Does that mean we don't follow the Lord and love him and listen to his commands and things of that nature? No, it doesn't mean that. Does it mean, hey, the Lord says, well, take a day out of the week and take that to chill and not do any work? Is that a thing today? If I'm looking at this word and I'm obeying everything else here, I can't not see this. So what I need to do is understand what that means for us today. So I want to bookmark that because I want to get an understanding of it, and then I want to come back and teach that to you once I have that understanding of what that means for us today. And then again with the young man, with the rich guy, right? He said, what did he say to him? If we go to again 19 verse 17. Oh, yeah, and he said, and Jesus says, do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not give false testimony, honor your mother and your father. That's the rest of the commandments. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, honor your mother and your father. What else does it say? It says, you shall not steal, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or any of those things. So what does that mean? That means that these things here we need to observe in the promised land. We cannot go there and think that we are not to observe these things, to keep these things, but not only with us, but with our children and children's children. But with that being said, focus on the first and second greatest commandment. Focus on loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and loving your neighbor as you love yourself. Remember that. Keep that written on your heart. Remember those two things, and then everything else will follow. Everything else will follow. That's what I believe. I didn't. Well, granted, here's the thing. I didn't want to kill, or steal, or do anything like that to anyone prior to following the Lord. But even more so now, when I began to follow him, I didn't want to drink anymore. I didn't want to bake anymore. I don't know if everybody who's watching this knows this, but right before I kid you not, the Lord will use our shortcomings to save us. So I would bake snacks. I learned how to. I said, you know what? I don't need to buy brownies or anything from anybody. I'm a smart girl. I can figure it out. So I found out how to do it, and I learned how to not only create the oil but also to make snacks. And it was, it's not something that I'm proud of. I'm just saying, listen, I understand. The Lord will use anything. But what I'm saying is when he did call me, I didn't want to do those things anymore. I wanted to just stop. I didn't want to do anything that would hurt my relationship with him, that would prevent me from experiencing the Holy Spirit in my life, all of those things, right? So those are the things that we need to observe in the promised land. We need to observe them now. We need to observe them in the promised land. We need to make sure that we're teaching our children and our children's children about those things. And we can't let it go. We can't not do those things in the promised land. So the promised land is not a place where we're supposed to prosper, increase, multiply, and then forget about the Lord. It is not a place. We don't follow all of his commands all the way until we get to the promised land, begin increasing, and then forget about him, and then let it go, and then no longer do the things that he's asked us to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of stop this right here. I have, again, like I said, I have three more sessions that I want to talk about. So next week, what I want to talk about is, what is the land flowing with milk and honey? What does that mean? So we're talking about, I'm giving you the understanding of what you need to understand before you go in the promised land, or what you need to remember while you're in the promised land. But also want to give you an understanding of what is the promised land. What does that mean for us today? What does it look like for us today? So that's what we're going to talk about next week. And then after that, we're going to talk about, again, in Deuteronomy 8 and 18, where he says, I'm the Lord your God who gives you the ability to produce wealth. What does that mean? And so I believe that in the promised land, it's, like I said, it's just different. The word says that it's different. I want to tell you what that means, what I believe, what he's shown me about what that looks like for us today. And then how does he teach us how to get wealth? Does he give us the ability to do that? He gives us different strategies and different things to do, and it's in the Word of God. It's in there. So we're going to talk about all of that. So with that being said, I just pray that you got something out of this message. Like I said, I had pre-recorded this before, and it was like 45 minutes, so I'm doing good right now. But anyways, I pray that you got something out of this, and that you took notes or whatever. I pray that it sticks to your heart, and then everything that I'm giving you here, I would suggest just going into the Word and learning yourself too, and getting your own understandings too, because sometimes, I can kind of give you it, I'm giving it to you from the Word, but sometimes my own personality and things kind of flow into that. And what I think is a good idea for you to do is to go into the Word and reread these scriptures and go through them and get an understanding of what I'm talking about. It'll help you better for even next week when we talk. Okay. So, anyways, I love you. I want you to have a wonderful day. Evening. It's my bedtime, actually, like beyond my bedtime. So, I pray that you just have a wonderful time. Enjoy your evening, enjoy your day, and we will resume next week. Okay? All right. Well, take care, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.